we're learning of new, concrete, sinister details of Donald Trump's plan to seek retribution against his critics and political opponents and people he just doesn't like. Number one, in the form of a new attorney general nominee. And number two, of his plan to fire career Justice Department officials who investigated him. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a couple of videos to look at, but we're going to start with this one here, which is Donald Trump announcing plans to fire career Justice Department officials who are just doing their damn jobs.
We have some breaking news just coming in. According to the Washington Post, President-elect Donald Trump plans to fire the entire team working with special counsel Jack Smith once Trump takes office.
So we're going to dive into this a little bit, okay? And we got another clip to play as well. But before I get to the clip, I just want to remind you, and we'll get to the new attorney general nominee because it all bleeds together. When Donald Trump becomes president, he will be the head of government and head of state. He will be the pinnacle of the executive branch. The Justice Department falls under the executive branch. The Attorney General of the United States reports to the president. They are at-will employees, the Attorney General, that is, of the president. Now, over years, especially since President Nixon, the second most corrupt Republican president, or second most corrupt president, period, after Trump, of course, we have institutionalized this idea that while the attorney general works for the president, there also has to be a degree of independence because you don't want a political actor like the president directly ordering prosecutions and investigations because, as we saw with Nixon, that is subject to abuse. So there's broad authority, but the specifics of investigations and prosecutions and that sort of nitty gritty, the president's supposed to stay out of that. Democrat or Republican. That's the theory. Donald Trump wants to upset the apple cart, and he intends to fire the career civil servants who worked in the Justice Department, who were simply doing their jobs, working on a team appointed by special counsel Jack Smith, who in turn was appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland, who in turn was nominated by President Biden. And this team lawfully, correctly investigated Donald Trump. And rather than only terminate the investigations into him, which unfortunately he has the legal power to do, he also intends to go one further and fire the people themselves. Pretty sick stuff. So we're actually going to listen to a former FBI official. I think it's Andrew McCabe, the gentleman up there in the top left corner. This is what he has to say about this development.
What struck me about this headline is he is then dismantling the investigation, which was based on quite hard evidence. Grand juries indicted him for it, of attempting to overturn the 2020 election, but then using the Justice Department to follow and investigate what there is no evidence of. Even his own former Attorney General Bill Barr said so, of significant fraud in the 2020 election. What does that tell you about the direction of the Justice Department under Trump?
I think it's the direction that we all saw coming with another Trump administration. I mean, let's remember that Donald Trump continues to do exactly what he promised to do from the stump. And in this case, that is to seek retribution against the people he thinks did him something, did him dirty, these quote unquote rogue bureaucrats. But let's remind ourselves that these rogue bureaucrats conducted an investigation that complied with the law. They collected evidence. They presented that evidence to a grand jury of 23 of Donald Trump's fellow citizens. And those people, after reviewing that evidence, decided there was probable cause to believe that Donald Trump had committed a crime, both in D.C. regarding the election and in Florida regarding the documents. And that is how he got indicted, not out of lawfare, not out of political persecution, not because Joe Biden said so, but because these folks did their jobs. And now it appears they're going to pay a pretty significant professional price, which is shameful. And it's a state that it's sorry to see that we are sinking to this level where an incoming president just engages in retaliation against people who have the temerity to potentially expose his unlawful activity.
I mean, when you put it like that, that's pretty sobering. Again, it's not like these people were brought in on a temporary basis and their contract is expiring. That would be one thing. At the end of the day, this is pure retribution. You dare do your job when I'm not president and there is credible evidence of me engaging in unlawful activity. You dare follow up on that, even though you had to get authorization from a grand jury? How dare you? You will pay a professional price for your defiance, for your, devotion to rule of law. Rule of law doesn't apply to me, says Donald Trump. Pretty sobering stuff. And the last thing I'll say is there's a possibility that he can do that. Right now, kind of following up on a video that I did recently about Project 2025, it's important to remember that many, many, many federal employees have employee protections. The vast majority of federal employees are not fireable at will, even by the president. Cabinet level people are. This idea that, the president nominates a secretary of state, gets it confirmed by the Senate, but then he can fire that secretary of state or attorney general or whoever whenever he wants. But the bureaucrats, the civil servants, they have employee protections, as many Americans themselves enjoy. So it remains to be seen about whether he has to fire them for cause or whether he can, fire them at will. The reporting I've seen suggests that he actually does need to produce some cause, but that's something that if he does it will have to be litigated in court and consider who comprises the Supreme Court. I'm not confident that this right-wing supermajority, 3 of whom had been appointed by Trump himself, will defy Trump and say that, yeah, federal employees in the executive branch are absolutely entitled to, respectable employee protections that could protect them against a president. I suspect it's very likely that not only will Trump fire them, but in the subsequent litigation, it's very possible that this right-wing Supreme Court, should it make it there, would be like, absolutely, the president can snap his fingers and fire anybody. Then, of course, eventually, if and when a Democrat becomes president again, perhaps this right-wing Supreme Court will say something. No. Yeah, I'm sorry. Only like Republicans can do that, or maybe people have a little R next to their name when they run for office. They're the ones that constitutionally have the power to do this. But that's where we are. One last thing to talk about is Donald Trump's new nominee for Attorney General, Pam Bondi. Now, she replaces Matt Gaetz, who was Donald Trump's first Attorney General nominee and who ultimately had to withdraw his name. Pam Bondi is, in her own way, also very bad. We'll get into it. The New Republic is talking about this. Trump Attorney General pick Pam Bondi is about to regret what she just signed up for. Trump's choice to run the Justice Department may win confirmation, but Senate Democrats can lay down some serious markers during her confirmation hearing. Matt Gaetz's withdrawal from consideration as Trump's Attorney General is unquestionably a big victory for the rule of law. But now that Trump has put forth Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, whose loyalty to Trump is almost as slavish as Gaetz's, it raises a question. Why assume she'll be any less wedded to his agenda of unleashing the Justice Department on his enemies and otherwise reducing it to a tool of his most corrupt designs and whims? After all, a willingness to put Trump above the Constitution is a requirement for serving with him, especially in such a pivotal position. As Talking Points Memo's David Kurtz notes, Trump will wield the DOJ as, quote, a centerpiece of his retribution, corruption, and destruction jihad, end quote, and his Attorney General will merely be, quote, the figurehead for that effort, end quote. That's why Democrats should start thinking right now about the opportunity presented by Bondi's Senate confirmation hearings next year. This will be a major occasion to unmask just how far she'll gladly go in corrupting the rule of law and unleashing the state on all the, quote, vermin, end quote, he has threatened to prosecute. Quote, the Attorney General will be the weaponizer in chief of the legal system for Trump, Representative Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, told me being Greg Sargent, who wrote this article. Pam Bondi has been very committed, a very committed Trump loyalist through his most flagrantly lawless moments. As Politico reports, just after he lost re-election in 2020, Bondi immediately joined forces with Rudy Giuliani to sow doubts about the results, helping lay the groundwork for his insurrection attempt. Bondi also stood by him when he faced prosecution for his criminal hush money scheme and impeachment for extorting a foreign ally. All this isn't just ancient history. It raises questions about what kind of attorney general she'd be in a non-obvious way, which is where the confirmation hearings come in. For instance, how will a devoted election denier turned attorney general handle remaining prosecutions of people who assaulted the Capitol? Does Bondi view a pardon for all the January 6 criminals as in keeping with the rule of law? One House Democrat points to an interesting wrinkle. If Trump does pardon them, he'll have to decide between individual pardons and a blanket one. As this Democrat notes, Bondi should be asked, quote, what does she think of a mass pardon? Sorry, words are hard. Democrats can also press Bondi on how she'll respond if Trump orders her to drop all remaining January 6 prosecutions. This is an opportunity for political theater. They can highlight specific cases of really heinous January 6 violence and ask Bondi if she'll defend it when Trump pardons those good people. Quote, what happens if Trump pardons the Proud Boys leaders who were convicted for seditious conspiracy and in instigating the violence? Said Tom Jocelyn, lead author of the January 6 committee report, and suggesting lines of questions for Bondi. Quote, what about the dozens of defendants convicted of assaulting cops? Jocelyn adds that pardons for them would provide a major boost to violent far-right extremist groups in this country and would, quote, legitimize their cause. Democrats should confront Bondi with all of that, make her own every last bit of it. Trump has threatened to prosecute his enemies without cause. How will Bondi respond when he demands such prosecutions? He's vowed to yank broadcasting rights to punish media companies that displease him and send the military into blue areas for indeterminate pacification missions. His advisors are reportedly exploring whether military officers involved in the Afghanistan mission can be court-martialed. Raskin says Bondi should be confronted on all of this. Quote, ask whether she thinks the First Amendment and due process are any impediment to what Trump has called for. Of course, the Attorney General oversees law enforcement on a host of other matters. She'll be asked about that as well. But it's worth noting that Trump doesn't have any genuine vision for the Justice Department beyond turning it into a vehicle for his unshackled state persecution of designated enemies of MAGA. How far he gets will turn heavily on what his consiglieres, this term from The Godfather, refers to a top-ranking advisor of the Don, the head of a mafia. For those of you who have not seen The Godfather, which you absolutely should, it's one of the classics, are willing to do when the corrupt orders really start coming. Unlike Gates, Bondi seems to want to retain a tenuous connection to the purportedly respectable conservative legal movement. During her stint as Florida Attorney General, she engaged in questionable practices, such as refraining from joining a lawsuit against Trump University after Trump donated $25,000 to a political committee supporting her. But nonetheless, it's a major law enforcement job in one of the biggest states in the country. Bondi has also engaged in traditional lobbying and typical conservative legal advocacy. It won't be easy for Bondi to answer hard questions about what she'll do as Trump's Minister of Retribution, but Trump expects her to deliver on all of it. On the other hand, you have people like Dana Loesch, who used to be the spokesperson for the National Rifle Association, the NRA. And this is what Dana had to say about the future Attorney General of the United States. And it's gross, but if anything, I do appreciate her candor.
Why in the hell are we even entertaining anybody that has zero respect for due process for Attorney General? Were people not bent over a barrel and told to grab their ankles for Merrick Garland enough? Were we all not abused enough by the DOJ? Parents who spoke up at town halls. Did you like the fact that you were labeled a domestic terrorist because you showed interest in protecting your sons and daughters in front of the school board? Did you like the fact that you were presumed to be a threat or to be guilty of something before being able to plead your case and have the FBI clear you of that tag? Because that's red flag law in practice. If you hated that, you're going to hate what she promoted. I don't get this. I don't get people who are like, oh my gosh, we have deep state. And then they're like, gosh, can we fluff a member of deep state? Who can we go after and slob all over next? I don't get it. It boggles the mind.
So there you go. She doesn't want anyone interested in due process. Why would you even consider it? She says. And that potentially is what she's going to get, and albeit a more respectable form in the form of Pam Bondi. Food for thought. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.